It's Tuesday, which means it's game day as the Hurricanes take on the New Jersey Devils in game 5 of round 1 in the 2025 NHL Playoffs. Today is pretty simple. Win in advance.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Searchcast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a terrific Tuesday edition of the podcast as we get to preview Game 5 of Round 1 for your Carolina Hurricanes as they look to win in advance to make it to Round 2 of the Eastern Conference side of the playoffs. What are the storylines going into Game 5? What possible lines can we see in this game? And do we have any injury updates on Frederik Andersen? And what are the keys to the game? But before we jump into all of that, this episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Now, storylines going into this game. Obviously, for your Carolina Hurricanes, if they win, which it's not going to be if, when, and it's basically you win and you move on. That's kind of the mindset for the Hurricanes right now because you're up 3-1 in the series. You just beat New Jersey 5-2 on Sunday. They take a 3-1 series lead. Andrei Svechnikov gets the hat trick. Jacob Slavin with just a wonder goal, going short side, top shelf. Brent Burns scores a goal. And there you have it. Freddie Andersen does get the win after leaving in the second period. And, Pierre Kachekov shut the door, 14-15. That's what you look at in Game 4. Game 5, pretty much replicate what you did in Game 4. You go out there and right from the rip, impose your will on the Devils. You already won the first 2 games of the series at home. You did decisively in Game 1, 4-1. A little bit tighter in Game 2, but still got the win 3-1. But now you got the Devils with their backs against the wall. And obviously, they're going to come out swinging because, it's desperation time. If they lose, they're out. So you got to understand that there's going to be some intensity to the Devils, and that's where the Hurricanes really need to stick to their game. Now, from Sheldon Keefe on Monday, said you're not going to have Kovacevic, Dylan, and Luke Hughes aren't going to be in this game. So now they're, down those guys already going in. Of course, Jack's not going to be there for the series either. So the Devils are pretty much depleted on the back end of things where they have a bunch of guys out. Yeah, they got Siegenthaler back, but this is where you have a Devils team who is struggling across the board in terms of getting any production. Bottom six is having a tough time getting anything going. They're basically having to rely on Brott and Heischer to pretty much do almost all the work on the offensive side of things. Defensively, they're kind of just strung out. Markstrom can only do so much, and it's tough for him right now. So if you're the Hurricanes, this is where you go and impose your will in Game 5. You already got the crowd fired up because they know if it's a win, you're moving on type of situation. So Lenovo Center is going to be loud. And as long as you keep doing what you've been doing, especially, in how you did in Game 1, how you took care of business, you kind of held out in Game 2, but then you took care of business in Game 4. They say that series don't start until you won on the road. Well, you won on the road, and you've done it pretty decisively. And the thing, too, is you're looking at a team for the Hurricanes where you've gotten a power play goal in 3 of the 4 playoff games. You're over 30%. You're 4 for 13. You're looking pretty well on the special team side of things. Plus, knock on wood, you are still 100% going 12 for 12. You're holding the Devils, who had the 3rd best power play in the regular season, to 0 goals. So this is where you just take everything you've done so far in this series and just keep doing that. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about updates for injury side of things, but if Anderson's not ready to go, then you got Piotr coming in, and what a way for him to get introduced into the series, where comes in, has to replace Freddie, gives up an early goal on the second shot that he faced, but then after that shuts the door. So that Kochetkov, has seen some action. He knows what this intensity of the series is going to be. He can hold down the fort because he set a record this season for himself on wins. So he can get the job done. He had 26 and did bulk of the work this season once again. So if you have to get a Piotr, you're going to be good. So overall storyline wise, it's just you got to take care of business at home. You've already done it before. You won the 2 games last week. You took games 1 and 2. Second one, like I said, was pretty close, but game 1 was decisive. You just won game 4 in a very decisive fashion on the back of a hat trick from Andrei Svechnikov, and you're getting scoring from everywhere. You got Ahon, Jarvis scoring. You got, like I said, you got Slavin, you got Burns, you got Logan Stankoven putting goal, pucks in there. He got 2. Taylor Hall's got some assists, and that this is a Carolina Hurricanes team that how great their 5-on-5 play is. They're one of the best, and now you got special teams rolling. You're over 30% on the power play, 4 for 13. Your PK is absolutely shutting down the Devils, and you can say what you want about how the Devils are a team that's in a tough spot. Injuries are tough, but as you hear from 32 Thoughts the podcast or other podcasts around the league, no one's gonna feel sorry for you, and that's just a tough situation. That's the nature of the beast. Is guys are going to be hurt, and stuff happens, and it's just one of those things where the Devils are depleted. The Hurricanes are one of the deepest teams in the playoffs, and pretty much everyone outside of Anderson's healthy. It's just one of those things where you can only control what you can control, and that's just the situation of it. So for Carolina, what you can control is dictating the pace and playing your game like you did in games 1, a little bit in game 2, but more so game 4. You pretty much played your style of play, imposed your will, and now you're coming to game 5 looking to do the same exact thing. And you look at the other series where Washington's up 3-1 on Montreal. So this could be a situation where if the Hurricanes and Washington both finish their games in 5 or at the very least 6, you already know what your matchup's going to be, and you're probably going to know your schedule sooner rather than later. But that's just kind of where you're at right now for Carolina. But you don't even look at round 2 right now. Right now, all you have to do is take care of business on Tuesday night. You go get the win, and then you're looking at that's 7 for 7 in whatever you want to talk about, a first round matchup, whether it's a qualifier or if it's an actual round. You've gone 7 for 7 in your opening round in a playoff format. And that's all that really matters right now is just getting that 7th. You take care of business. You dispatch the Devils. You move on, and then you focus on the second round when the second round happens. But as long as Carolina goes and does their job that we've been seeing so far in this playoff round, where they stick to their game plan, structure defense, do the grand man-to-man, get the transition going from defense to offense, control the O-zone, which they've pretty much done all round so far, put pucks on net, get puck movement going, just do what you've done in the regular season to get 99 points. And now you're 3 wins into round 1, and now you're looking at, a potential series clincher at home, which is great to have because you're going to have the celebration of the fans at Lenovo Center. And as long as you get that 4th win, you move on to round 2, and now you get a little bit of extra rest before that round starts. But it's just going in and do your job. That's kind of the main storyline, is the win and advance mentality that the Hurricanes are going to have right now, and the way they've been playing recently. Outside of that, game 3 they had to come back, force double overtime. Game 2 was, like I said, you had to rely on a barrage of big stops in an empty netter. But either way, this is a Carolina Hurricanes team that's looking at a win and series is done, you move on type of game in game 5. Now, What lines could we potentially be looking at? Do we have any injury updates on Frederick Anderson? We'll stick around and we'll talk about that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, which I definitely think you should, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Gametime, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Gametime is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck. The prices actually drop as the puck drop gets closer. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So in terms of injury updates on Freddie Anderson, per Monday, Rod said he had no really further updates. He should know later that day. Unfortunately, still haven't heard any updates on Frederick Anderson, so hopefully when you guys hear this, whenever it is on Tuesday before the puck drop on Game 5, we'll probably know sometime Tuesday if Freddie Anderson is ready to go. If not, obviously, you're going to be looking at Pyotr Kochetkov being in the net for the Carolina Hurricanes coming into the game. But now the main question is, what lines are you looking at for the Carolina Hurricanes coming into Game 5? And it should be very interesting because the fact that you look at how Game 4, they explode for 5, they got 5 goals, got the hat trick from Andrei Svechnikov, and it's do you go back to these lines again, or do you kind of go back to what you saw for games 1, 2, and 3? And that's the one good thing about the Hurricanes is the fact that they have an assortment of riches of having depth. They're one of the deepest teams in the playoffs. You got guys like Roslovic on the back end, Stillman, Jost, now Alexander Nikishin, since his contract's officially official. So, like I said, do you throw Ross back in? Do you kind of format the lines back up to how they were before, or do you stick with it? Because right now, if you look at what the lines you saw in Game 4, it was Andrei Svechnikov with Aho and Blake, and of course, Svech gets the hat trick. You got Taylor Hall with Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Seth Jarvis, who I thought did pretty well in Game 4. Monarch, Stahl, Carrier, which, I mean, you're talking about just a bulldog line of guys who are not afraid to throw bodies on players. And then you got Eric Robinson with Mark Jankowski and Logan Stankoven, which, that was the first, I think that's the first time those three have been together so far this season. I thought they did pretty well. And if you're Carolina, you're looking at a situation where the Devils are going to come out flying. They're going to be throwing some heavy hits. They're going to do all they can because their backs are against the wall. They got all the pressure on them. So this is where it's like, could you go to Roslovic? I think you could, but if you're looking at a situation where you're going to be looking at a Devils team who are going to be coming in throwing basically everything and the kitchen sink at you to keep their season alive, I think this is where you go to Jankowski again to keep him in there because he's a big body, 6'4". He does win faceoffs. So he's a really good faceoff guy. So if you're Carolina, I think having Jankowski stay in could be the play here. So if knowing Rod Brind'Amour and the fact that if he sees a line combos that have success, especially after a Game 4 like you just had, where you have, like I said, Svech, Aho, Blake, Hall, Kotkaniemi, Jarvis, Martin, Stahl, Carrier, with Robinson, Jankowski, Stankoven, I think this is your group going into Game 5. This is the same lineup you roll with on the forward side of things, because obviously defense doesn't really change. It hasn't really changed all season, barring if a guy needs rest or he's injured or what have you, or there's paternity leave somewhere, whatever situation happens. Defense isn't going to change. You're going to have Slavin and Burns. You're going to have Orlov, Chatfield. You're going to have Gostisbehere and Walker. That's just how it is. It's not, nothing's really going to change out of that, despite if something pops up. So that's your defensive core. Goaltending, like I said, if Anderson isn't ready to go, if he's still not 100%, if the Hurricanes feel like, hey, it's game 5, we're potentially going to win it in advance, if Freddie isn't 100%, or if he's feeling somewhat better but isn't, peak Freddie as he's been so far in the playoffs, then they might go with him, give him some rest, and then it's going to be Peter Kochetkov in the crease, which, will be his first start of the playoffs, which is fine because you saw that he did pretty well in game 4, coming in on basically, coming in cold for the most part, and he stops 14 of 15, shuts the door, and, keeps the Hurricanes in the lead, and eventually they win. So Kochetkov in that wouldn't be a bad option. I mean, you're looking at a guy who's got 2 more years of control with the Hurricanes. So if they're going to look at him as a potential 1A next season, hey, this is your opportunity to see what he can do in a playoff series, which you've seen him play playoff games before. And I think this is a perfect game to hey, it's game 5. You get the win. We move on. Let's just roll with Piotr and see how that works out. But, like I said, defense isn't really going to change. It's the same group that it's been pretty much all season outside of some weird things that happens that might change it. But then forward core, if Rod usually sees a team play really well with a certain line combo, he's going to go back to it the next game. Like, hey, let's just replicate what we did in that previous game. Let's see how this works for another one. So if there is a change, it could be Roslovic in for Jankowski again, and maybe you see another line shakeup. But with how Rod usually does things, I could see this be a situation where it's, hey, it worked last game. Let's run it back for this one and see how it works out. So I could definitely see this line combo of the forward core work out very well once again. I mean, you look at a game where you saw Andre have that game of his life where he comes out and just absolutely pops off and gets the goals they really need, and that's something he's been really wanting. And, even during the availability yesterday that the Hurricanes had, Andrei Svechnikov said, we have to go out there and play our best game. It's always fun to play at home. The fans are going to be cheering for us. And that's just the opportunity of closing out the series. And that he's been, looking forward to it. And the fact that these are the type of games he lives for, where he's, wanted to clear a series, finish a series out. And the way he played in game 4, it definitely gives you a big boost of confidence going into that. So that's something that you are really excited for if you're Andrei Svechnikov, because now you just had a great game with these guys on your line. Whole team played well, and that's kind of what you're looking at right now. So I think this is probably, if you want the best opportunity, the best way to finish the series out, I think this is where you just go back and run with the group that took care of business in game 4. And then you assess for, if you win in advance, then you assess what game 1 of round 2 looks like. But if you're going into game 5, you saw the success you just had in the previous game. Now you're up 3-1 in the series. If it's not broke, don't fix it, unless you feel like there's a situation where if you do add Roslovic in, how do you reshape the lineups? Because I think then you put Carey back on the 4th line. You put Stankoven on the 3rd with the Jordans. And maybe you keep the top 6 the same. Because I think with the game that Andrei Svechnikov had, you want to keep him going because Rod's been trying all season to kind of get him rolling. And if that combo of Svech, Aho, Blake works, then there's your opportunity to be like, okay, it worked in game 4. Let's see if those 3 can do it again in game 5 and go from there. Because obviously with Jarvis, Hall, and Kotkaniemi, that's a good second line. Because of the fact that you got the defensive defenseman or the defensive forward in Kotkaniemi, and then you got Taylor Hall, who can pretty much do it all as a good facilitator of the puck. And then you got Seth Jarvis, who's a great all-around two-way forward who can throw bodies, play good defensively, and obviously we know how good he is at scoring goals. So that's a great, second line that backs up a first line that has a fiery player in Jackson Blake. Sebastian Aho is another great all-around two-way 200-foot player. And then you got Andrei Svechnikov, who's your power forward that you played a game in game 4 that you've been waiting to see him have all season. That's a game where, he goes out there, plays the physical side of the game, but then also is able to score goals too. So however the Hurricanes want to do this, it should be very interesting for how they set up the lines for game 5. And that's just the bag of riches the Hurricanes have with just how great their depth is. So that being said, what are the keys to the game for the Carolina Hurricanes to win Game 5 and close out the series? Well, stick around. We'll talk about that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NBA playoffs are almost here, or they actually are here, and so is the NHL playoffs. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, what are the keys of the game for the Carolina Hurricanes coming into Game 5? Well, puck drop is set for 7:30. It's going to be on, of course, FanDuel Sports Network, TBS, HBO Max, however you want to do that. The Hurricanes right now, I know it's cliche, but it's been a big storyline for the entire, first round, and it's special teams. We all know the Devils kind of had that slight advantage coming in. They're in the power play, second on the penalty kill. Hurricanes first on the penalty kill, 25th on the power play. But right now, the Hurricanes carry the 7th best power play unit in the playoffs right now at 30.8%. And of course, the best penalty kill. As I talked about back in segment 1, they are 12 for 12 on the PK, 4 for 13 on the power play, and right now the New Jersey Devils on the penalty kill. How about 10th at 69.2%? That's because of the fact they've gotten scored on 4 times on the power play so far in 4 games. So that's going to be another thing for me. It's like if this turns into another game where you're going to see a lot of penalties and special teams play come into this situation, I think with how the Hurricanes have been playing, knock on wood, you pretty much, that you can get the job done. You're doing pretty well. That's exactly what Tim Gleason wants, especially for the PK, is just absolutely put a lot of pressure on them. Don't let them get set. And if you have the chance to go down and try to score shorthanded, well, you got the green light. If it's possible, go and get the job done there. And the power play's been rolling. You've scored in 3 of the 4 playoff games so far, round 1 on the man advantage. So keep doing what you've been doing. Put pucks on net. Keep keep moving the puck around, move the bodies around, and keep the Devils on their heels. And get the certain guy who can get some zone entries and get into position of bumpers and who's on point, who's quarterbacking and stuff like that. I think that's where the special teams is going to help, because people know the Hurricanes are a great 5-on-5 team, but if the power play keeps rolling like it is now, then that's a big problem for other teams. Because I've been saying this, you guys have been hearing me saying it all regular season and going, especially in the last few games of the season, going into the playoffs. You need to win on the road, and you need to get your power play going. And right now, the Hurricanes have won on the road, and their power play has been particularly hot so far. So that's the one thing that you do not want Carolina to start rolling in all facets of their game, because they're like I said, they're one of the deepest teams going into the playoffs. This is pretty much the healthiest team the Hurricanes have had outside of Freddie being questionable right now. But other than that, this is a Hurricanes team where they can really put some damage on some teams. In fact, if they can control 5-on-5 and special teams, that's going to be very tough. So I think this is where one of the key things is you keep the special teams rolling into this one, because the Devils are going to come out flying and do everything they can to secure the win. And that could be a situation where they might run into some trouble of putting themselves in a tougher spot to where you might get a lot of advantages if you're the Carolina Hurricanes. Now goes into the second part of just keep playing your game that we've seen in games 1, 2, little bit in 3 where you force in a double overtime, but mostly game 4. Stick to your strategy of just play 60 minutes of Hurricanes hockey. Start off from the rip, because right now you're averaging 3.5 goals per game, which puts you 6 out of the entire playoff group. And right now you're holding the Devils to 1.75 goals for per game, which is actually dead last in the entire playoff. Outside of game 3, you've pretty much held them to 2 goals or less. And that's a really big advantage for you, because right now the Hurricanes are first in the playoffs, allowing only 1.75, and the Devils are 10th, allowing 3.5. So you're a team that's been playing very well in the power play recently. Like I said, you're 4 for 13, 100% on the PK, 5-on-5 boys, you've absolutely shut down the Devils. Like, I know it's even. I think it's like 6 goals. I think it's like 6 goals each on the 5-on-5. But like I said too, though, the Devils are only averaging 1.75. They've had a 3-goal game, a 2-goal game, and 2 1s. That's basically it. They are right now the last ranked team in terms of goals for, and you're the number one team who's given up the least amount of goals on average. So if you keep playing into that of playing your style of game with, like I said earlier in the episode, transition, you stick your structured man-to-man defense, you get the transition going, you get the strong back checking, which we've seen from guys going back there and disrupting plays. You keep a strong forecheck to put the pressure on the Devils in their zone, because there's been some games where you've seen the offensive zone time for the Hurricanes almost doubled New Jersey's. So if you stick to that of being aggressive in all 3 zones, but playing smart aggressive in those areas, I think the Hurricanes are going to be in a good spot. So as long as you play your 60 minutes right from the jump that we saw in Game 4, this is where you have a great opportunity that if you jump on them early, just forecheck them to death, back check them really hard, play your structured defensive style that we know that the Hurricanes can play. I don't see there's any reason why the Hurricanes don't finish this thing off in 5, done and over with, and then you move on to round 2. And the other key to the game is just don't fall into the traps of what the Devils are going to do, because New Jersey's going to come out and just try to get into your skin, get your best players off the ice, try to go some 4-on-4, or have them draw penalties. It's basically stay within yourself to not fall into those traps, because this is a do-or-die game for the Devils. If they lose, they're out. So they're going to try to do whatever they can to, like I said, keep your best players off the ice in terms of penalties. So you basically can't retaliate, can't get into the scrum battles. It's basically just try to keep your head in this game and limit the opportunities you're going to give them. Yeah, you're 12 for 12 on the PK, but you don't want to play with fire where you give them more and more and more opportunities. Keep doing what you've been doing. Limit your penalties. 2 or less, you should be fine, and don't go into scrums. Don't go into whatever is going to happen to where you have the potential of going 4-on-4 a lot. Don't open the ice up more for the Devils than you need to. Basically, just stay disciplined and limit your opportunities for them to go on the power play. And I think if you just stay into your structured mental capacity of this game where you just stick to what you can do, I think it'll be fine. And that's where you're looking at the Carolina Hurricanes, where they can go out there, do their job for 60 minutes, do what's been working for them, and limit the opportunities for the Devils, because you can play with fire so long before you get the horns, and that's what you don't want to do against the Devils, because, they're down a lot of guys, but they still have guys that can score. But as long as you stick to your 60 minutes of hockey and do what you did in games 1, a little bit in 2, and what you did in game 4, I think this is a great opportunity to finish the series off in 5, get a little bit of rest before game 2 or game 1 of round 2, and we'll see how that plays out from there. But it should be a very interesting game, and it should be very electric at Lenovo Center for game 5 for the Carolina Hurricanes on Tuesday night. But guys, that will be a Tuesday edition of Locked. Thank you for making the first day. Why don't you go check out Locked On NHL Game Night, every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneShoeZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Zachary Martin, where if you click the link tree in my bios, you can check out all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcasts, well, it's the Search Cast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For this show, well, Locked On Hurricanes is on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating and review, because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you liked the show as well. Share with other Kings to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Tuesday and have fun on Tuesday night at 7:30 watching your Carolina Hurricanes take on the New Jersey Devils as they look to win in advance to move on to round 2. But until next time, as always, let's go Canes.